So let's get into our first discussion in around creatine, hero or risk to your hairline, where we'll be getting into some of these risks around that. But maybe the best place to start is to take a step back and Dr. Helms, maybe you can lead us through this of what creatine actually is and what does it do within the body.
Well, how about we cue a video up that does that job for me?
I would love that.
Oh, I would love that too. Pretty cool video, right? And I think it speaks for itself. It's very clear. You know exactly what creatine does. No. So ATP is, you've probably heard it, it's the energy currency of life, and it's in the cell. And it's the best way to explain the way ATP operates is that it is essentially like a rechargeable battery, and it is providing you energy at different rates depending upon the energy system that's at play. So when you see people doing boxing, jumping, weightlifting, bodybuilding, powerlifting, sprinting, anything that is basically you trying as hard as you can for a restricted time domain, you're going to be leveraging the phosphocreatine system and depleting ATP. And I'll explain a little bit more what that means in a moment. Most sport is done at the highest intensity possible, but within a time domain. You know, if you run a marathon, if you could run it faster, you would, but you can't sprint a 100-meter pace for a marathon, let alone 800-meter or a 400-meter pace. So we have these different energy systems in the body. You know, we have fatty acid oxidation, we have glycolysis where you use carbohydrates, and then at the very early beginning of the spectrum where you do the only real activities that matter, power and strength sport and bodybuilding, and everything else is you know, a waste of time. I'm kidding. This is where creatine is the hero and not a risk to your hairline. So if you want to generate a whole lot of ATP right now, you're going to deplete it within a few seconds of what's currently there. But creatine is that fast charger. It's the lightning charger, if you will. And it can replenish and rephosphorylate ATP so you can use it again. And it's going to get you through about 10, 15 seconds of very high intensity activity. So phosphocreatine is that energy system. And creatine supplementation, and this is really important, creatine's being made in our body. We produce it endogenously. It's not like a foreign compound or a weird chemical the way it's talked about. It's definitely not a hormone, as some people might describe. There's a lot of myths related to what creatine is and how it works. Essentially what it's doing is just giving you more of a boost to this very initial energy system, which fuels resistance training, and then you get more out of your training over time. And there's also some side benefits, like Jeet mentioned, how it enhances basically muscular hydration, and hydration in the cell creates a more anabolic environment. It has osmotic effects. And there's some signaling data that indicates it seems to have some direct effects on muscle building. But the primary way that creatine is able to help us build muscle and perform better across multiple sports is this initial phase of supplying ATP or regenerating ATP at a faster rate. A couple other important things I'm going to go through is that the reason why we supplement with it, earlier I said it's endogenous, it's made in our own body, is because it's very challenging, if not almost impossible for 99% of people to reach fully saturated, topped up muscle creatine stores through diet alone. We do get creatine primarily and almost exclusively from animal products and primarily meat. It's not very high in milk or dairy, so even lacto-vegetarians aren't getting very much. But cooking degrades the amount of creatine in meat, so it drops it somewhere to at least 50% or slightly more. And even on a very high protein diet, it's something that you will typically see only reaching the levels where we can boost performance from supplementation. So that's basically the way it works. It's not a hormone, again, just to reiterate. It's an amino acid compound from methionine, glycine, and arginine, and it's stored in the muscle. Osmotic effects, makes you lift heavier, get jacked, doesn't lose hair. Good times.
Great answer, and also bonus points for fitting in the topic title into your answer as well. With that, though, let's get into that second part and revisiting the myth you already addressed. And you mentioned around hair loss being this big concern right now, and people do point to maybe some evidence, or at least suggest that there is. Can you maybe explain to us where this comes from, what that evidence is, and what actually we know now from the totality that we have?
Yeah, I think we've got a graphic for this that I want to pull up from the one study that actually sparked this whole controversy. And I mentioned measuring the actual outcome, not just a marker or a proxy for something. This is a perfect example of why. So back in 2009, we're talking 16 years ago, a single study was published by van der Merwe where they compared people using creatine and those not using creatine, a placebo. Point being, one took creatine, the other group did not, and they looked at DHT. And if you're not familiar with DHT, it's dihydrotestosterone, and that is specifically the main mechanism of male pattern balding. It binds to the follicle, it causes damage to the hair, and you get the thinning and the male pattern balding that keeps me up at night. There's a few really important things about this. DHT only has that effect if you have a genetic predisposition to male pattern balding. So your DHT levels are not going to predict hair loss unless you have that genetic predisposition in the first place. That's one. Two, DHT functions in a normal range. And if you guys take a look at this figure right here, what you're looking at is a period of time. And you do see at that mark, the green is a little higher. And that just says, oh, look at that. The creatine group had higher DHT at that time point. But now I want you to look at what are those two dashed lines. That indicates the normative range of DHT. So yes, one group did have statistically higher DHT at that time point, but neither group got even close to being above the reference range, the normal ranges of DHT. So that's one thing. Two, there wasn't exact parity at baseline either. And there's a phenomenon of research called regression to the mean. And when you just take some people and you measure them, all of our hormones, all of our metabolic markers, everything about us is doing this all the time. As researchers, what we need to do is establish what is the normal variability in something so we know what a real change is. And if you catch someone or a group, because we do small sample size research in sports science, on the upswing, statistically, you're likely to see the downswing in the next measurement. And if you catch two groups doing this, it can look like a difference when there may not really be one. So when I look at this, I see two groups that had a very small change in DHT that technically differed, but neither one got anywhere near the upper end of the reference range. They stayed within it. And it's not like I know the genetic predisposition towards male pattern balding. And most importantly, we didn't measure hair loss. We measured a DHT, which is a proxy for it. Yeah. And the good news, to give everyone the confidence they need that they can build muscle and also have hair, there was a study that was published by LAC really recently where they actually did for 12 weeks measure hair loss, and there was no difference in the group taking creatine or not. So this never constituted evidence that creatine caused male pattern balding. It constituted, oh, that was interesting. Maybe we should do some follow-up research on DHT. No one ever did. And we just repeated this, and it became one of those BS things that just never stops. And now we actually have data directly contradicting the claim. So the good news is this dilemma has been solved. The world is a better place, and we're going to have hairier, more jacked men. So what more could you want, right?
With that, though, before we move on from some of the potential side effects, we've ticked one off, but of course people will hear of others, just maybe from an overview level, and we can revisit these later if you wish. Can you maybe just, again, put on people's radar, what are those most common concerns that get raised around creatine and what we do or don't know about those main ones?
Yeah, a lot of the common ones you hear is it'll cause dehydration. You know, if you're retaining water, you need to drink more water, and if you don't drink more water and you're retaining it, then you're going to have some of these negative effects. And it's already stressing the kidney, like was mentioned before, which is not true. We got from our listicles. Another thing that is somewhat relevant, and where there is always a little bit of a grain of truth, is that when we do creatine research, most of it we're using the loading phase. You know, we're taking 20, 25 grams a day for 4 or 5 days. And the only, I will even say, inconsistently observed side effect of taking creatine occurs in the loading phase, and it's mild GI distress. Everything else has not been well documented that has been claimed or is seen as a potential myth. Even weight gain, like you do sometimes see a scale weight change, but it's not super consistent. It's, maybe a 1% increase in body weight from my experience. But ultimately, creatine is one of the most well-researched supplements, as Claire said, and it's been proven to be safe in various populations. And it's now being, not only just its safety profile is proven, but its potential analgesic effect, prophylactic effect for certain issues, and seen as a health-promoting supplement outside of just performance. So it's an exciting time for creatine, not because we haven't researched it well, we don't know what it does, but we're looking at new novel applications of it.
Claire, can you maybe discuss with us a bit about how you use it with the players and in the team environment, and maybe even at that level, do you have any resistance or concerns that maybe individual players or parts of management might come to you using a supplement like creatine?
I think when it comes to creatine, especially in team sports, well, maybe not rugby, definitely in football, there's some very wild and wacky beliefs and questions I've had in the past. Creatine, that causes injury, that's going to increase my injury risk. And I'm looking at them like, maybe the opposite. And another one actually more recently was like not understanding what creatine does at all, but if by taking creatine, will that help me meet my protein target of the day? Just not knowing at all what creatine is or does. And I think often it can be associated directly with muscles or bodybuilding or weightlifting or gain, but actually not looking at it more so as a performance supplement in team sport. There can be resistance. And I suppose something that I do around creatine is, well, if working in a new club or with a new group or with new staff or with new players, is being strategic with who you introduce it with first. Maybe the ones who are potentially more malleable or trusting and interested, and also obviously the ones that it might be more beneficial for, and then gradually building a kind of a strategy around it. And the second thing I'd say is around the kind of resistance piece is not going in and saying everyone has to take this, and this is why. It's more like using that performance language around it. So it's not, I think in football in particular, you don't really want to go after, creatine's going to give you muscles or big muscles, because people don't want that, players don't want that. It's more around targeting your, targeting the language that like actually it can improve performance, or using like performance language like, repeated efforts, sprint efforts, speed, speaking their language of what they care about. They don't really care about the muscle side, and actually some of them want smaller muscles. Yeah, it happens. Hairline's been important as well. Yeah, so the performance piece being important, I think, so using that language around it, and like even sometimes speaking with a player or with a team around creatine, I don't even mention muscle mass or maintaining muscle mass. It's more actually around the performance piece of like your high intensity, repeated sprint efforts, coming into your 80th, 90th minute, your 100th minute, your extra time. Are you able to continue to kind of produce that performance that you were given in 5-10 minutes into the game? And I love that analogy you used around the battery. Definitely going to steal that, of like it is the lightning or the switch or the battery. So it basically is your energy giver. And when you are working at those really high intensities, back to that like turnarounds where muscles could be fatigued, etc., it is one of those ones that can help. Yes, I use it with athletes, depending on positional plans, depending on their goals. But from that performance side, yes, it can be beneficial from a muscle mass, retaining muscle mass, preventing loss, especially in season, traveling a lot, game. Gym stimulus can be limited, particularly when you have 2-day turnarounds, like not a whole lot of lower body gym time to do it. Using creatine to help maintain muscle mass can be one, potentially supporting that recovery between short turnarounds. Another one being around like injuries, surgery in particular, supporting that kind of recovery period there as well.
So maybe it'd be useful then, Yu Liang, maybe can you bring us through some of your applications with some of your athletes that have covered other types of sports, and even on an individual basis, how you might use it. In what context do you use creatine with the athletes that you work with?
I always say I'm not a researcher. I'm a sport nutritionist, sport dietitian, good at practice. So I read many articles from Professor Stu, many professors, and take the knowledge to our athletes. So one day, I want to introduce creatine to my athletes. Not only my athletes. And I tell the coach, hey, creatine is very good for the athletes. You can try to use it. At that time, the coach answered me, no, creatine, no, not good. Many question marks around me, I read too many articles. There's no information about why. I don't know why. I asked why. The coach told me, if you use creatine, will cause your muscle sore. I never see this information from any article. Maybe I read not too much. Yeah, maybe. I reacted, why? Why you feel use creatine? Do you use it? No, I never use it. You never use it. Why you feel use creatine will let your muscle feel sore? Because it means creatine. In Chinese, in Mandarin, if we translate creatine into Chinese, into Mandarin, there are two characters. One is muscle, another is sore. So the first character is ji, means muscle. Another is suan, means sore or arc. So combined together, the new word ji suan means muscle sore. So it's language problem.
Right.
Yeah, it's culture problem. Oh, I know why he feel when the athletes use creatine, will feel comfortable. I know this, so I teach them, I tell them, and take out many articles to show them creatine is safe, and the creatine is also good for your athlete. I educate many times in different places, different styles, different methods to tell them. The coach, after he tried the creatine, later many athletes use creatine. Last year, parents, many athletes are using creatine, especially some short distance athletes use creatine. Yeah, very common.
Jeet, if I come to you with some of the points of confusion or questions that your clients have came to you about, specifically relating to creatine, what are some of those most popular that you tend to have to try and address?
Yeah, so most of the clients, or I would say the followers, which I have through social media, they come and ask me about, if I would be bloated after taking creatine. That's one thing. So yes, bloating happens, but not over your skin. Like, you don't feel bloated and heavy. Yes, it holds water, but inside your muscle. So eventually it gives you more fullness and you look more tight. So that works well. The other thing which they ask me a lot about the hairline part, would I lose hair because if I use creatine? I say, stop drinking beer. Do not drink beer, do not eat a lot of unnecessary over-fried food when you go home. Nothing will happen to you, right? So they don't focus on the basic simple things, the diet, fixing the diet, and they demonize creatine, So you have to fix 10,000 other things in your life, where you're sleeping, what sort of environment you live in, is it polluted, is it fresh, So people do not focus on these things and they just say, oh, this is happening because of creatine. And when it comes to the, hair loss, of course, it is like highly dependent on your genetics, as Eric mentioned, that, if you have that sort of family history where you come from a predisposed male pattern baldness. Of course, you will eventually be there, of course, when you age, you will lose hair, but don't say that, because you're taking creatine, you're having that. So this is what I always tell, fix the small little things, don't focus on this, and you must use creatine because that's the number one supplement which I sort of push to people, even before whey protein. I say creatine is first. So yeah.
Great. Thank you for that insight. We're coming close to time, so what I'm going to ask Dr. Helms to do in about 60 seconds is to make this practical for people who are maybe considering a creatine supplement and to make this actually what we do with it. Can you maybe bring us through what we know about dosing, the timing of creatine, and then different types of creatine supplements people may come across with different names, and rattle something off that brings it down to something practical in about 60 seconds.
I'm going to get it all together, and we can even put up the figure, which I won't even
That'd be fantastic.
go through. But so top right, on the right, we see what happens when you take creatine. Creatine monohydrate specifically It's been shown in many studies, you're increasing your muscle creatine stores somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20%. That's great news. What you do not need to do, even though it has been long-standing practice, is try to improve upon creatine monohydrate because it's highly bioavailable. And when you see people selling other types of creatine, it's a marketing strategy to try to get an edge in a market that is uncomplicated. Just buy it. You also don't need to combine it with carbohydrate. You don't need to take other forms like I mentioned. Nothing's ever beat creatine monohydrate unless you consider beating it costing more, which if you want to do that, feel free. And you also don't have to do the loading phase. The loading phase is something that will speed up the process of getting creatine saturation in the order of days. But I have been taking creatine since 2004 nonstop because it's not a hormone that needs to be cycled. There's no reason to go off it. So 3 to 5 grams or just a maintenance dose is all you need. Just taking a maintenance dose of creatine daily, you'll get there a few weeks later and you'll forget because it was sometime during the first Bush administration that you started taking it if you stick with it long term, and you're going to get all the positive benefits.